All right, welcome everybody to Listing Group Therapy. Today we are going to be talking about some of the essential clauses that we're finding are showing up over and over right now in contracts. Sometimes they're offered by the buyer, sometimes it might be something you counter back with. But essentially what we want to talk about are going to be your escalation clauses and your appraisal waivers, as well as we'll get into a little bit of, perhaps if we got some time, post-possession agreements. All right, so anybody have experience writing an escalation clause?
Not a couple.
What was that, Paul?
I've just done one or two here, recently. It was my last listing. We tried to get a couple houses under contract, and I put that escalation clause in all of them. Finally got one. So.
Excellent. So an escalation clause, by way of just definition, so everyone knows what that is. An escalation clause is a clause that allows your contract, your offer, to increase in value above somebody else's offer that comes in. So it's not like you have to have this back and forth happening. You put in an offer and you say, this is my max bid. Think of it like eBay. You've used eBay before, you make a bid on the property, but you only have to pay as high as a little bit more than the next highest bidder. So you can say, I'm willing to pay $300,000, but if the next highest bid is $275,000, you're probably paying $276,000. Okay, that's essentially what an escalation clause does. It's maybe we should just call it the eBay clause. That's my joke for the day. All right, I won't do that again. And the escalation clause, actually, I find that it helps you avoid getting into the multiple offer back and forth emotional entanglement that will ensue from a buyer's standpoint. So some things to remember when you're writing an escalation clause, okay, is that you have to have enough increase in what you're offering in order to make it actually palatable to the seller. So example, if I were to say, my offer shall increase by $500 over the next highest offer up to $350,000. Is $500 really enough that's going to be enticing? You say, well, $500 is $500, but what does that really do for you?
Next highest net offer.
Ooh, okay. So we have this thing between the gross and the net offer, all right? So that becomes something that you have to understand is that the net offer is removing any payments the seller has to make, what it is that you're adjusting on the offer. So your typical escalation clause, as I was saying, $500 in itself is not enough to really be the highest and best offer. And that's really what you're looking for when you have an escalation clause, is to automatically make your dollars honestly doesn't really send the message of, I want this, I'll pay for it, here you go. I would recommend minimum $1,000 on any escalation clause you write, whether you attach it to the net or to the gross, and we'll break that down. But a minimum $1,000, and $1,500, $2,000 just makes it even better, because most escalation clauses I see say like $500 or $1,000. So even being willing to say $1,250, $1,500 above the next highest already strengthens your offer and sends a signal to the seller that, hey, they want my property. They're going to pay extra. They're going to do more to get the property. So that's the first line of your escalation clause, is buyer agrees to pay X amount above the next, we're going to say right now, highest offer. But that's where that becomes the second element to consider. When we just say the next highest offer, what's not being taken into account is, are concessions being requested? Is the seller being asked to pay for the appraisal? Is the seller being asked to pay for a home warranty? Is the seller being asked to split or pay the HOA costs? All of those are things that reduce a person's gross offer. So let's use $300,000 as the list price. The home is listed for $300,000, and you make an offer for $300,000, but you need 5,000 concessions on that. your net offer to them is $295. Does everybody follow with that? So you're saying, I'll pay you $300,000, but I want 5,000 concessions, meaning you give me that back. So your net offer is $295. So one of the ways you can work an escalation clause is to talk about the net offer. And Chelsea, you brought up that net offer. Will you talk a little bit about why it is you would look at the net instead of the gross? What does that?
You're working on your seller's behalf, so they are concerned with what that net number is after they pay closing costs for buyers or home warranties or whatever. That's the number that you need to compare apples to apples on. So not the total number that they're offering as a purchase price. Like 275 asking for $6,000 is really 269. So if you get a 273, it's not your best, but if they're asking for nothing, that's $4,000 different for your seller.
Yeah. So this becomes something that you'll see the buyer agents, they don't pay as much attention to, but as the listing agent, you need to be paying attention to. What is that net offer? If the escalation clause says we'll pay $1,000 over the next highest offer up to 3,000, and I'm asking for 5,000 concessions, okay, and somebody submits an offer at 305. Okay, so someone submits an offer at 305. My offer would then be at 306, right? Because I said $1,000 above the next highest offer. But I'm going to take 5,000 back. So my net offer to my seller is 301, and the other offer was offering 305, no concessions. So you can see how the purchase price can end up looking better, but the take home not as good.
And if you're working for a buyer, you've just cost them $5,000 unnecessarily.
Yeah.
If you're looking at offer compared to a different offer, not a net offer, if you're competing against one that is asking for $6,000 and they wrapped it in, like that example, then all of a sudden your clean offer is going to go up a lot more.
Where it didn't need to, right? So that's where you want it. You need to be clear in terms of what you're offering. Now, I will say that when you write the escalation clause in terms of buyer's offer shall be $1,000 over the next highest net offer up to 315. There comes a need to ensure that the listing agent understands what the heck you just sent them. Because the majority of agents are going to read that and they think it's, okay, well, it's $1,000 over whatever anybody else offered. And that's not what you offered, right? It's as to the net. That's important because you as the listing agent, not seeing that there's $5,000 in concessions being requested, will advise the client to take that offer that's going to now be 306, but they really got 301 instead of getting 4,000.
You're cutting out. Anybody else?
Yeah.
The internet here on Wi-Fi has been unpleasant. Am I still cutting out?
No, you're good now.
Everyone's looking at me. Okay, I'm good now. The Wi-Fi here has been just pleasant today. So I apologize. So just let me know whenever I start pulling the max headroom, right? So that $1,000 net is important for you to understand. As my recommendation, whenever you submit one, talk about it as the net. Put it in there that you're submitting your offer to be $1,000 above the next highest net offer up to 315,000. So, example, I'm not asking for concessions this time. And I submit an offer and say, I'm willing to pay up to $1,000 over the next highest offer up to 320,000. No concessions being requested, okay? Net. $1,000 over the next highest net, up to $320,000. Somebody else comes in and they offer saying, all right, well, we're willing to offer up to $325,000. And in theirs, they're asking for 2% concessions, which wouldn't be unreasonable to ask for at that price point. Well, 2% concessions is 6,000, right? So which one ended up being the higher offer?
First one.
The first one, even though the purchase price would come in lower. Now, the reason that it's important for you to have these discussions with listing agents is because most listing agents are going to just look at the purchase price number. They're only concerned about their gross. They're not thinking about the rest of the transaction because they haven't been educated on it. They don't have enough experience doing it. And they're just looking to the vanity number of, hey, look, we listed your house for 300 and I've got you an offer down for 325,000, even though the take home is going to be less than one of the other offers submitted because it was based on the net. So what might that conversation look like with the listing agent? If you're the buyer agent, Chelsea, what does that conversation look like when you do that?
It's a little bit of patience because most of them don't know the difference. And then having to explain that we have a clean offer, here's this, here's what this means. So if somebody else is asking for this, here's what that means. And kind of go through everything and say, I'll pay this over that.
Correct. So Paul, let me role play this with you. You be the listing agent, okay? I'll be the buyer agent. Okay, so it might go something like this. Hey Paul, I just want to let you know I'm sending over an offer right now. You should probably have it in your inbox. And my clients, they really love the property. In fact, we're coming in at your list price of 300, and they just moved here from out of state, so they sold their house. They got a bunch of cash. They're willing to go up as high as 325 to get the house. Now, our offer is, we have an escalation clause in there, and I'm sure you've heard and seen escalation clauses. You know, we're going to raise it $1,000 above the next highest offer. I just want to make sure that we both understand what
Cutting out.
we will raise $1,000.
You're cutting out.
Cutting out.
Yeah. Yeah, your mouth.
All right. Oh, now it tells me I'm unstable. Hold on, let me see what I can kill here on my computer.
There's a LAN cord in Dennis's office where I sit if you need it.
I love Chelsea's.
I have one plugged in. Just my wall isn't turned on yet, right? Just give me that. Okay, is that any better?
It is. Yeah.
All right, I killed Outlook. Maybe that was part of it sucking up some bandwidth, and I am plugged into the wall. Just the wall hasn't been turned on yet. Anyway, so there in the clause, I've noted that our $1,000 increase is based on the net that you receive. Okay, and so I just want to make sure that you understand and that I understand. I've communicated it so that you hear what I'm saying. That what it means is based on whatever offers you receive, and you take out concessions, you take out home warranty, take out HOA, whatever is left, we're going to beat that whatever's left by $1,000 every time, up to 320. That's asking. All right, I'm not going to do it. Chelsea, why don't you take over and you explain it to Paul? Do the role play for us. Since
Did we get it? Because I think we got most of what we were talking about.
Okay, did you? Because I don't know where I left, where you lost me. All right. Everybody get that then? Does that give you the general idea of what we're talking about here, what to do?
Yep.
So here's the other thing. When you go to write an escalation clause, contact me or Broker Mike. We will help you get your initial one or two done so that you have it written the right way, and we'll help you make it explained and the whole deal, okay?
Okay.
So make sure the first time you're writing one or the next time you're writing one, contact us, one of us, and we will help you through it, all right? Appraisals now. That'd be another thing we're seeing a lot of. What was that? Somebody say something?
I was just going to say, Paul can always ask his team lead too.
Oh, there we go. You can always ask your team lead, Mr. Matt Coaches. Showing up. Good to see you, buddy. Well, your name anyway.
Kind of.
So yes, you could. So you could always contact Matt as well. Appraisals become the next issue. You know, when you start escalating and you're going up to, you know, the market value says something, it should be 300,000. You're going up to 325. you're inherently creating an appraisal problem. You should anticipate that the appraisal is going to come back less than that 325 because the market's not there yet. So
Cutting out.
waiving the appraisal.
You're good again.
Okay, back now. So waiving the appraisal is something we have to understand what we're doing when we do that. We are saying that we will pay the entire amount above whatever the appraisal comes in at. So if it does come in at 300 and we're under contract at 325, writing a $25,000 check in order to get that property. Okay.
And that's over and above whatever you have to put down for your minimum down
Correct.
payment.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that's an additional 2. That's correct, Marlon. So you want to make sure from the buyer standpoint, you are making this explicitly clear with your client that that's what's happening if you're going to waive the appraisal. I don't know that it's necessary to always, in fact, I'm going to say it's not necessary to always waive the appraisal. Are there times that it's probably what has to be done in order to get a property? Yeah, it is in this market. Whether or not that's the right decision is only something the buyer can decide. Our job is going to be to completely advise them and help them understand, you do this, and it comes in, you're writing the difference.
So on
That's
that last one that I wrote, the escalation clause, I also wrote in 3,000, I think, above appraisal value up to what they were willing to pay. So there was a little bit of, could have been a little bit of gray area there, but I had to call her and specify or tell her they will not pay anything over that max amount. But if it's, let's just say in this case it came in at 315, they would pay 318, but they're not going to go over the 325, even if it came in at 323. So that's the way I wrote it, but I don't know if there's probably a right way and a wrong way to write that. So probably ought to
So
have.
that is great. That is a great way to handle it so that you are pre-negotiating that issue, right? And whether if it's 3,000 above and that works, it might be 5,000 or whatever it is you decide. I'll give you an example that I just had over this weekend. Have a client from that's just moved down here from Washington. They've got plenty of cash to be able to pay differences on things. In fact, they're going to be putting 100,000 down on the home they're purchasing. We found a home in the historic district in Mesa, listed at $399. Already was having multiple offers on it within, third day on the market. So we went in strong, and I had already had the conversation with them in my buyer consult with them of the need to present strong and to not play around, because every listing agent's just looking to suck you into a bidding war, which, as a listing agent, that's what I'm looking.
Cut out. Cut out.
You're back.
This is so fun.
We heard you say every agent's just trying to suck you in more.
Yes, thank you. So, every listing agent's trying to suck you in, and so that you get into that bidding war. So you need to come in strong and just present right from the beginning, so you don't end up yourselves in that bidding war. So our offer, we knowing that there were multiple offers coming in, and that the home was priced right. So the home was not priced high; it was priced well. It wasn't even at the very top of the bracket, the valuation bracket. It was a well-priced home. We came in and offered 410 as our opening offer. And then we had an escalation clause of 1,500 up to 435,000 is how far they were willing to go with it. Now, I had in there a $5,000 concession. So I did not talk about net in what I wrote intentionally. As the buyer agent, I did not put net in there in this particular case. Knowing there could be a bidding war, I wanted it to be a vanity thing. Oh, well, we'll take Jason's offer because they're at 420 instead of this other offer that's at 415 when they were actually the same offer, right? Because most of them were having no concessions. I then put in 2 appraisal clauses. One, we said that we will waive the appraisal and pay 410 regardless of what the appraisal comes in at. So if the appraisal comes in at 400, we'll still pay 410. If the appraisal comes in at 390, we'll still pay 410. Because my clients were totally willing to do that. And the reality is there was only a likelihood of about $10,000 to $15,000 from that 410 that they might have to pay. It could possibly come in at 395, maybe 400, but it's likely going to come in at 400 is where I think the appraisal would come in at. So that's what we put in there. So at 410, we'll waive everything. You get 410 no matter what. Then I put in a second appraisal that if the escalation clause is activated, then we are willing to pay the agreed upon escalation price. And if the appraisal comes in low, then we will pay up to $10,000 above the appraised value, capped at 430, whatever the escalation number was, 435. So in that case, we were saying really the strategy for us in both cases was max out of pocket, additional above an appraisal was probably going to be 10,000, but we can make it sound really good by saying, we'll pay you 410 no matter what and waive the appraisal. And then above that, we'll pay up to $10,000 in the difference up to the full value. So if it came in at 415 and we were at 420, then we would only pay $5,000 additional, right? We got the house at 410.
Wow.
So they were very happy, very happy. And it had a lot to do with the fact of how strong we came in and the terms that we were putting there. Because I knew from my conversations with the listing agent that what they were really looking for, what the buyer really wanted, was as much a sense of certainty that that buyer would go through with the transaction. And so by laying out those additional terms, we were laying out that, no, we're here. We're putting down 100,000. I had our lender call and he talked to them and explained to them where they're at in the lending process, about how long it was going to take to get the loan to go through, how well qualified they were, all that kind of stuff. And then I also gave them in my email to them a short little resume of myself and my team as to why you can have certainty when working with me and Luxury International, you're going to be fine, that this deal is going to go smooth. Those were the things that ended up winning us the bid. So we had both the escalation clause and the appraisal, two types of appraisal waivers in the same addendum. Did all of that go through? Good. I didn't see this and that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. Any questions about that? And I will post right now. If you guys have any questions, I'll post the addendum so you guys can see what that language exactly looked like. I'll post the addendum to that transaction in the chat. Anybody have questions on any of that?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Real quickly, just wanted to say thanks for the class. It's really helpful. And I'm curious what usually falls into the exceptions, the concessions. Like, I think I know what we're talking about. That they fix certain things, or what are you usually asking for?
So your concessions in the contract, your concessions are limited to your cost of really getting the loan paid for, and some title stuff. So if we open up the, I'll do this. I'll open up and show you in the contract where it says this, because I have had times where they're trying to use concessions that we provided to pay for additional lender, like buy down the points.
Right.
And I've said, absolutely not. We won't allow that to go to that. And had agents get really mad, like, well, we always do that. No, you don't always do it with me.
Home warranty too.
Yes, home warranty too, yes. Okay, can you guys see the purchase contract?
Yes.
You guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so right here, the seller concessions, line 100, part 2J. In addition to the other costs seller has agreed to pay herein, which would be their separate line items for a home warranty, separate line items in an addendum for the HOA, that kind of thing. Seller will credit buyer either a percentage, 1, 2, 3% of the purchase price, or in our case, we said $5,000. The seller concessions may be used for any buyer fee, cost, charge, or expenditure to the extent allowed by buyer's lender. Okay, so they've gotten really broad with it. And previously it was much more limited, but now it's like any buyer fee, cost, or charge that's allowed by the lender. So it's incumbent that you be finding out from the lender whether it's allowed. A credit is not always allowed, and a credit is different than a concession. Okay, so in my case, what I'm actually trying to get this $5,000 applied to, because it was a 2.5% co-broke and my buyer broker was for 4%, is I'm looking to get this to pay my bill. So then I have down here in section 8 to clarify, at successful close of escrow, any seller concessions, recognizing we may negotiate them for something else, and they always negotiate it for some other number, then they say all other terms remain the same. So these terms would remain the same if that were to have happened. Any seller concessions provided shall be applied towards buyer's closing costs, such as those associated with financing, buyer agency fees, which is my buyer broker fee of 4%, escrow fees, title fees, appraisal fees, recording fees, and any other costs associated with buyer's purchase of the property and that are allowed by the lender. So in this case, that $5,000 is going towards the buyer agency fees.
Sure. Okay, so does that mean then if you're going into the cash ops, or typically you're not going to have concessions, and a cash buyer should expect to pay for all that out of pocket over and above, I assume?
Typically, yes. If you're in all cash, you should. That's really what you should expect to be the case. In our case, since we're putting $100,000 down, what we have as a potential is that we don't want to, if we can get away with it, we don't want to pay for the cost of obtaining the loan. We'll pay for the purchase price, but we don't want to pay for the cost of obtaining the loan. So in that case, those concessions, even though a client may be putting $100,000 down, and I got this question back, they're putting $100,000 down. Why are they asking for 5%, $5,000 in concessions? I say, because we're looking to reduce any of the other costs associated with the acquisition of the property, whether it be title, escrow, or agency fees, whatever, was my answer back to the agent.
Surprising to me they wouldn't already know
How
that.
do you? Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say it's surprising to me they wouldn't know that, and I'm shocked that you said earlier that some agents wouldn't even know to look for the net versus gross. Anyway, go on, Marla. Thanks.
I'm just wondering how you know the priority of what that $5,000 concession goes to, or does it matter? You said it goes to your additional 1.5%.
Yeah,
We didn't get to hear you.
magically appeared. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So now do you hear me?
No.
Okay. So there's not a priority. It's more like, here's the pot. Everything goes into the pot that has to be paid, and we're going to use that $5,000 to pay it. Now, we can choose which things we're going to pull out of the pot first to pay on it. And in our case, through the buyer broker, it's established that the buyer agency fee is being paid first.
Okay.
So that's a different discussion. In fact, we have a recording of exactly how to do much of this that Carol Royce did for us in terms of getting paid. This is something I've been doing, the 4% buyer broker, and the steps that I outlined here. I've been doing this for about 3 years this way.
Jason?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how common it's done, and mathematically it's not always huge, but whenever appraisal is in question, Elizabeth amends the contract to be a percentage over a flat amount, so that as the purchase price changes, if it does, she at least gives less of the seller's money away in concession, because it's now a percentage that moves with the low appraisal. That's just something she does. I don't know how commonly it's done or whatever. I thought I'd ask you about it. I'd
say that's extraordinarily uncommon, and it's a great idea. When when what's being requested for is like, in this case, a dollar number. If the dollar number of concessions is what's being requested to then tie it to a percentage, great. If it's already a percentage, it's going to move by itself. But that's actually a really good idea, that if I'm asking for $5,000 and the appraisal is going to be whatever, that if the appraisal comes in low, then we already determine at 410, $5,000 is whatever percent of 410. And so then that's the concessions being given on the transaction, subject to a low appraisal. So actually, I think that's a good idea. I have not heard that before, Charles. That's why I say I think it's really uncommon. I've never heard or seen that before. But I like
She's
it.
special.
I like it. I like the idea of it. It requires for something like that as the listing agent, when you counter a full explanation to the buyer's agent as to what you're doing, and in such a way that they can adequately communicate it to their buyer so the buyer doesn't feel like they're getting shortchanged.
Absolutely.
That would be the only additional part in your process you'd want to make sure you have, but I like the idea of it. So tell Ellie kudos.
I will. Sorry I came in late. Awesome content,
Oh,
Jason.
good.
Thank you.
It's all good. Any other questions? I dropped in the chat the addendum number 1. I'm going to have to run early. I had a meeting with, he is first in command of KW Command. So Josh Team, our president at KW, the guy just under him, David Voorhees, is waiting for me 3 minutes. I'm making him wait. We were supposed to be on at 1:30. He had to move it to 2:30. So I apologize. I'm going to have to bounce early on this, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, jason.wells@kw.com, or call me, and I'll be happy to answer your guys' questions. Make sure you get that addendum, open it up, download it. That'll give you some of the language that I've used, just tweak for the numbers. All right?
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody.
Hey, Charles,
Yes?
are you in the market